The bus left him at the bottom of the mountain road just before sunset. Li Wei stood alone with his small suitcase in his hand. The engine noise faded down the slope, swallowed by distance. After that, there was only the wind moving through the bamboo. The village sat higher up, tucked between dark hills. From far away, it looked the same as it had when he was a child. Grey roofs, thin smoke rising from a few chimneys, narrow stone paths cutting through green fields. But something felt wrong. It was too quiet. He began to walk. The path was uneven. Small stones shifted under his shoes. Bamboo stalks leaned over him, their leaves brushing together with a dry, whispering sound. The wind moved through them in long breaths. He remembered running here as a boy, chasing dragonflies, hearing women call out to one another from their doorways. Now there were no voices when he reached the first house. The wooden door was open. An old man sat just inside, peeling garlic into a metal bowl. The knife tapped lightly against the rim. The old man looked up. For a moment, their eyes met. Recognition flickered. Then the man lowered his gaze and continued peeling. "Uncle," Li Wei said softly. The man nodded but did not smile. "You came back?" "Yes." A pause stretched between them. "I heard about your mother," the old man said. His voice was almost a whisper. It was sudden. Li Wei nodded. He felt the word sudden sit heavy in his chest. His mother had been strong. She carried water buckets herself. She swept the courtyard every morning. Then one afternoon, she lay down to rest and did not wake up. "I'll be staying at the house," Li Wei said. The old man's knife slowed. "It's been locked. I have the key." Another pause. The wind moved through the bamboo again, brushing the eaves. "Be careful at night," the old man said quietly. Li Wei waited for him to explain, but the man only returned to his garlet. He walked on. More doors were open as he passed. Faces appeared briefly in shadows, then disappeared. No one called his name. No one asked how long he would stay. Even the children were missing from the paths at the center of the village. He stopped. The ancestral hall stood there, larger than the other buildings. Its red paint had faded into a dull brown. The wooden beams were cracked. The incense burner in front of the doors was empty, its ash washed away by rain. He remembered bright lanterns hanging from the roof during festivals. He remembered laughter spilling into the courtyard. His mother's voice had once carried above the others, steady and warm as she led prayers. Now the doors were closed. Across them, a strip of yellowed paper had been pasted, stretching from one side to the other. The edges curled slightly. Faded ink marked the center, a seal pressed into the paper. Sealedy stepped closer. Dust lay thick along the threshold. No footprints disturbed it. A woman passed behind him, carrying a basket of greens. "Auntie," he called gently. She stopped, but did not come near. "Why is the hall closed?" Her fingers tightened around the basket handle. "It has been that way for years." "Why?" She shook her head. "It is better." "Better for what?" The woman's eyes moved past him, toward the hills. "For everyone." Then she walked. Away. Li Wei stood there until the light thinned and the sky turned grey. His house was near the edge of the village, facing the terraced fields. The wooden gate creaked when he pushed it open. Weeds had grown along the stone path. The windows were shut tight. He unlocked the door. The air inside was stale. It smelled of dust and something faintly bitter, like old herbs. The furniture was covered in thin sheets. A bowl still sat on the table, turned upside down. His mother's slippers rested neatly by the bed. He did not move them. He opened the windows to let in air. Evening had settled fully now. A blue mist clung low over the fields. The hills beyond were dark shapes against the sky. He lit a single lamp. Shadows stretched along the walls. The house felt smaller than he remembered. He boiled water and made tea, though he did not drink it. He sat at the wooden table and listened. At first there was only the wind. It moved through the bamboo in long waves. It pressed lightly against the paper windows. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once, then stopped. The quiet was not peaceful. It felt held, as if something were waiting for a sound to break it. He thought of his mother in this house alone. He imagined her moving from room to room, sweeping, cooking, tending to the small garden outside. He tried to picture her last afternoon, but his mind would not form it clearly. The lamp flame flickered. Then he heard it, low, so soft he almost mistook it for the wind. A murmur, he held his breath. The sound came again, stretched thin across the valley. It rose and fell in a slow rhythm. Not speech exactly, not singing. A chant. His skin tightened along his arms. He stood and stepped outside. The mist had thickened. It drifted between the houses, pale and slow. The moon was hidden behind clouds. The village was dark. The chanting continued. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It blended with the wind, but it was steadier, intentional. He walked toward the center of the village. No light shone from the windows now. Doors were closed. The paths were empty. The closer he came to the ancestral hall, the clearer the sound became. It was low and layered, like several voices speaking together in one breath. He stopped a few steps from the sealed doors. The yellow paper moved slightly in the wind. The chanting did not stop. His heart beat harder in his chest. He tried to make out the words, but they blurred together, swallowed by distance and air. He turned as footsteps approached behind him. It was the old man from earlier. He stood a few paces back, hands folded behind him. "You hear it?" the old man said. "Yes." "It is only the wind," he added quickly. Li Wei looked at him. "The wind does not chant." The old man's jaw tightened. Sound travels strangely in the valley. The murmur rose again, softer now but clearer in its rhythm. Li Wei felt something shift inside him. Not fear exactly. Recognition, the voices, stretched into a longer tone, and within it, carried thin but sharp as a thread, his mother's name. He felt the air leave his lungs. He stepped closer to the doors. "Did you hear that?" he asked. The old man did not answer. The chanting faded slowly, like breath leaving a body. The mist moved across the courtyard and thinned. Silence settled again, heavy, complete. The old man spoke at last. "Go home. Do not stand here at night." Li Wei did not move for a long moment. The yellow seal on the door trembled in the wind. He stared at it, at the place where laughter once spilled out into the open air. Then he turned and walked back toward his house. Dot behind him, the ancestral hall stood still. But as he reached the bend in the path, he felt it, not a sound, not a touch, a quiet pull, as if something inside that sealed building had noticed him return. Morning light crept slowly across the floorboards, thin and pale. Li Wei had not slept much. Each time he closed his eyes, he heard the faint rhythm again, rising and falling beyond the fields. When dawn finally came, the sound faded, leaving only birds and the scrape of wind against the bamboo. He sat at the small wooden table where his mother used to prepare herbs. Dust had settled in the cracks. A thin layer coated the teacup he had left untouched. The house felt heavier in daylight. He stood and began opening drawers, not because he needed to, but because he could not sit still. He told himself he was looking for documents, for old photos, for something to carry back with him, but his hands moved with a different purpose. He wanted answers. In the back room, near his mother's bed, stood a low cabinet carved with faded flowers. He remembered it from childhood. She kept incense and prayer papers there. The cabinet door resisted when he pulled it. It had swollen from damp air. Inside were bundles of dried herbs tied with red string, a small brass bell, old envelopes, there. Corners soft from years of handling, and behind them, wrapped in a piece of white cloth, was a porcelain bowl. He lifted it carefully. It was small, no wider than his palm. The surface was smooth but dull, as if it had been handled often. Inside, grey ash rested in a shallow layer. Mixed within it were thin strands of hair, dark and curled at the ends. His fingers froze. A faint smell rose from the bowl. Burned incense. Something bitter beneath it. He turned it over. On the underside, written in uneven ink, were 6 characters. The strokes were thin, pressed too hard in places, as if written with a shaking hand. Do not let them finish it. He stared at the words until they blurred. A knock came at the front gate. He covered the bowl again and stepped outside. The old man from the village centre stood there, leaning on a wooden cane. You were at the hall last night, the old man said quietly. Yes, the old man nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. Walk with me. They moved slowly along the narrow path toward the fields. The air was cool. Farmers bent over their crops in silence. No one greeted them. After a while, the old man spoke. You remember the ritual? Li Wei shook his head. Only the festivals, the prayers. The old man's gaze remained fixed on the ground ahead. It was called listening to the returned. The name felt strange in Li Wei's ears. It was not meant to summon, the old man continued. Not in the way outsiders think. It was for grief. When someone died suddenly, when sorrow would not leave a house, we gathered. We called gently. We asked the spirit to speak once more, so the living could rest. Li Wei felt the bowl's weight in his memory. My mother led it, he asked. Yes. They stopped near the edge of the terraces. Water reflected the pail. Sky had a steady voice, the old man said. She knew the old words. People trusted her. What went wrong? The old man's grip tightened on his cane. There was a girl, Mei Lin. Her father drowned in the river that year. She had not spoken since the funeral. We thought the ritual might ease her. The wind moved across the water, breaking the reflection into pieces. We sat in the hall, the old man went on. Incense burned. Your mother placed a bowl in the center. Ash and hair. A vessel. Mei Lin knelt before it. Li Wei swallowed. At first, nothing happened. Then the girl began to shake. softly, her hands twisted in her lap. We thought she was crying. The old man's voice grew thinner, her back arched, her mouth opened, but the sound that came out was not hers. It was low, old, her body bent, as if someone pulled invisible strings tied to her bones. Li Wei felt the morning air turn cold against his skin. "Your mother tried to end it," the old man said. She struck the bell. She called the closing words, but the girl would not. "Stop." The voice kept speaking, not to us, through us. "What did it say?" Li Wei asked. The old man shook his head. It named things we had not told it. It spoke of deaths long past. Then it laughed. The fields were silent except for distant water trickling between rows. "We carried the girl home," the old man said. She would not wake. The next day, officials from the county arrived. Someone had reported the gathering. The ritual was banned, the hall sealed, and Mei Lin, she was sent away to relatives in the south. A pause. She never returned. They stood without speaking. "The chanting," Li Wei said finally. "We heard it last night." The old man's eyes flicked toward the hills. "Grief does not leave easily. That is not an answer." The old man met his gaze. "Some doors are closed for a reason." When Li Wei returned home, the house felt smaller than before. He unwrapped the porcelain bowl again and placed it on the table. Sunlight touched the ash, revealing fine cracks across the surface. He imagined his mother holding it, writing those words underneath. "Do not let them finish it." Finish what? The ritual had been stopped. The hall sealed. The practice banned, unless something had not ended. He touched the ash lightly. It was cool and soft. The strands of hair lay tangled within it. A memory flickered. His mother washing her hands late at night. The smell of incense clinging to her. Sleeves her face pale but calm. He had been away at school when the ritual happened. She had told him only that the hall would be closed for some time. He had not asked why, as the afternoon faded. Clouds gathered over the hills. The air thickened, heavy with moisture. By evening, mist rolled down into the village again. Li Wei did not light the lamp this time. He sat in the dimness, the bowl resting before him. The first murmur came just after night settled fully. Low, steady, closer than before. It did not drift across the valley. It rose from within it. He stepped outside. The mist curled around his ankles. The houses were dark. No one stood in the paths. The chanting was clearer now. Layered voices moving together in a slow rhythm. He turned toward the ancestral hall. The sealed doors were barely visible through the haze. The sound pulsed, like breath drawn in and released. He felt it in his chest, and beneath the layered murmur, beneath the woven tones, a single thread of sound separated itself. Soft, familiar, his mother's voice, not loud, not crying, calling not his name, but something else, a word he could not quite catch. The chanting grew steadier, less distant. It no longer felt like wind passing through bamboo. It felt directed, as if it knew he was listening. Li Wei stood frozen in the courtyard, the mist pressing close around him. Behind the sealed doors of the hall, something shifted. Not wood, not paper. Something. Patient. The yellow seal trembled in the night air, and this time, When the voices rose together, they did not fade quickly. They held, waiting. The mist had not lifted by midnight. It lay low against the ground, pressing against doors and windows, slipping through cracks in wood. Li Wei stood in his courtyard, the porcelain bowl in his hands. The chanting had not stopped. It moved in. Slow circles around the village, steady as breath. He looked toward the ancestral hall. The yellow seal across its doors fluttered in the damp air. He did not remember walking there, only the sound of his own steps on stone. The village felt empty, but he sensed eyes behind shuttered windows. No one called out. No one tried to stop him. The hall stood in front of him, dark and patient. Up close, the paper seal looked thinner than before. The ink had faded to a dull brown. He reached out and touched it. The paper felt dry despite the mist. His hand trembled. He peeled it away. The sound was soft but sharp in the silence. Paper tearing from wood. A clean break. The chanting paused. Not fully, just enough to make him notice. He pushed the doors open. They resisted at first, then gave with a low groan. The smell inside was thick and old. Dust and ash, burned incense. That had settled into the beams years ago. Moonlight slipped through narrow cracks in the roof, cutting pale lines through the darkness. Dust floated in those beams, drifting slowly. The air tasted metallic on his tongue. He stepped inside and closed the doors behind him. The chanting resumed, softer now, as if it had moved indoors. The hall was smaller than he remembered. The altar at the far end stood bare. The incense burner was overturned on its side. Thin spider webs stretched between wooden pillars. He walked to the center of the room. His footsteps echoed once, then settled. For a moment, he stood still. His heart beat loud in his ears. He set the porcelain bowl down on the floor. The ash inside shifted slightly. He knelt from his pocket. He removed 3 sticks of incense he had taken from his mother's cabinet. His hands moved without thinking. He placed them upright in the bowl, pressing them into the ash. He struck a match. The flame flared bright, then steadied. He lit the incense. Smoke curled upward in thin grey lines. The scent filled the air slowly. He tried to remember the words. He had heard them once as a child, half asleep. His mother's voice steady and low. He closed his eyes and let the rhythm come back to him. An invitation, a calling not of force, but of listening. He spoke quietly. "If you are here," he said, his voice barely above a breath, "speak." The smoke rose straight at first. Nothing happened. The hall remained still. The beams did not creak. The dust did not stir. His knees began to ache against the wooden floor. He almost laughed at himself. Then the air shifted. It was small, just a thin draft that brushed his cheek. The smoke changed direction. Instead of rising upward, it bent sideways, pulled toward the far wall. Li Wei opened his eyes. The temperature dropped. Not sharply, slowly, as if warmth was being drawn out of the room. Through unseen cracks, his breath became visible in faint clouds. He swallowed. "I am listening," he whispered. The chanting outside faded until it was no longer separate from the silence. It seemed to fold inward, gathering in the center of the hall. A pressure began behind his eyes. Not pain, weight. He pressed his fingers against his temples. The pressure grew heavier, and then a thought that was not his. Soft, close, not. A sound in the air, but a voice inside the space behind his forehead. You returned. He stiffened. His own thoughts moved at the same time, trying to make sense of it, but the other presence did not interrupt. It slid between his thoughts, overlapping them. I came. For my mother, he said out loud. The smoke thickened. She did not finish. The voice was calm, almost patient. His chest tightened. Finish what? The air around him seemed to lean closer. She stopped the door before it closed. His breathing quickened. What door? A pause. Then images pressed into his mind. Not clear pictures, but shapes and weight. The sense of something held open. Something paused mid-breath. Wait in. The pressure behind his eyes deepened, until tears formed without him realizing. She ended it, he said. She struck the bell. Interrupted. The word settled heavily. Not ended. Interrupted the incense smoke. Curled tighter, forming a low spiral before him. Left waiting. The voice did not rage. It did not threaten. It simply existed, steady and old. His heart pounded harder. What are you? He asked. The air seemed too thin. A second presence brushed against his thoughts. Familiar, his mother's voice. Not a sound, but his memory layered over the other presence. Do not let them finish it. The words from the bottom of the bowl. His hands began to shake. What happens if it finishes? He whispered. Silence. Not empty silence. Listening silence. The pressure behind his eyes sharpened. His mouth opened without meaning to. A sound left him. Low, layered. It did not feel like his own voice. It moved through his throat slowly, shaped by something steady and ancient. The sound echoed against the wooden beams. Outside the hall, a door slammed open. Footsteps hurried across stone. Inside, Li Wei's body swayed slightly. His vision blurred at the edges. He felt stretched, not torn. Shed. The second voice overlapped his. Breathing, it spoke through him, but the words were not clear to his ears. They vibrated in his chest, deep and rhythmic. His fingers dug into the floorboards. Stop. He tried to think. The voice did not argue. It simply continued. Outside, more footsteps gathered. Someone called his name. The hall felt smaller now, as if the walls had drawn closer. The incense burned down quickly. Ash fell into the bowl. The pressure built until it felt like his skull might split. Then, just as suddenly, it eased. The smoke rose straight again. The air warmed. The weight behind his eyes lifted. He fell forward onto his hands, coughing. The hall. It was quiet. Only the faint crackle of the dying incense remained. He turned his head toward the doors. They were open. Grey light spilled in dawn. Figures stood in the courtyard. Villagers silent. Watching. He pushed himself to his feet, unsteady. The old man stood at the front. His face looked pale in the morning light. You opened it, the old man said. Li Wei tried to speak, but his throat felt raw. You heard it, he managed. The old man nodded slowly. Yes, A murmur moved through the gathered villagers. Not fear, recognition. "It has been many years," the old man said quietly, "but we remember that sound." Li Wei felt a chill run through him. What sound? The old man held his gaze. The second voice. The villagers did not leave when the sun rose. They stood in the courtyard of the ancestral hall, pale in the thin morning light. No one spoke loudly. Even the birds seemed to keep their distance from the roof beams. Li Wei leaned against one of the wooden pillars just inside the doorway. His legs felt weak. The smell of burned incense still clung to his clothes. The old man stepped forward slowly. The others gave him space without being told. "You should not have opened it alone," he said. Li Wei's throat was dry. "Then tell me why it was closed." The old man looked past him into the hall. His eyes moved across the altar, the overturned burner, the porcelain bowl still resting on the floor. "It was never about calling the dead," he said at last. Li Wei waited. The villagers shifted slightly, as if the air itself had grown tight. When famine came, the old man continued. "Many years before you were born, people began to change. Not in their bodies, in their homes." His voice was steady but soft. Grief stayed inside the houses. It did not fade with time. It spread. One death would be followed by another. Animals stopped eating. Crops rotted before harvest. Children woke screaming from dreams they could not explain. A woman near the back lowered her head. "We believed something was moving between us," the old man said. "Not a ghost of one person. Something older. Something drawn to sorrow." The word older seemed to sink into the wooden floor. "We called it the drifting one," he added. "It did not kill. It settled. It made the air heavy. It fed on what was already broken." Li Wei thought of the pressure behind his eyes the night before. The calm voice. "You tried to bind it," he said. The old man nodded. The ritual was not to summon the dead. It was to give the drifting one a place to stay, a vessel, so it would stop moving from house to house. The villagers' faces were still. Some looked ashamed. Others looked tired. Someone had to offer themselves, the old man said. "Mei Lin," Li Wei whispered. "Yes." The name hung between them. She had lost her father, the old man said. She believed her grief was already deep enough. She thought she could carry it. Li Wei closed his eyes briefly. "The night of the ritual," the old man went on. The bowl was placed before her, ashen hair to mark the bond. Your mother led the words. We asked the drifting one to enter the vessel and remain. The wind moved through the open doorway, stirring dust across the floor. At first, nothing happened. Then the girl began to tremble. Li Wei remembered the story from the fields. The bending spine. The voice that was not hers. It resisted. The old man said, it did not want to be held. It pushed back. His hand tightened around his cane. It was strong, not violent, just vast, like trying to hold wind in your hands. "And my mother?" Li Wei asked. She saw the girls, body bending too far. She heard the change in her voice. She believed the binding would break her. The old man's eyes met Li Wei's. So she stopped it. The hall felt colder again. She struck the bell. She called the closing words before the vessel was sealed. Silence, pressed against the walls. The drifting one had already entered, the old man said, but it was not contained. Li Wei's breath slowed. It was left between, he murmured. Yes, not free, not bound. Waiting, the villagers began to drift away from the doorway, as if they could not stand too close to the words. Since that night, the old man said, the sorrow has not left us. It settles over the fields. The rice spoils early. The fruit bruises before it ripens. Li Wei thought of the terraces he had passed, the dull color of the leaves. The children dream. A woman said softly from behind him. He turned. They dream of standing at this door, she said. They say someone inside is calling them to come closer. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. It does not harm them, she added, but they wait crying. Li Wei felt something shift inside his chest. The chanting, he said. It is not anger. The old man nodded. It is waiting. For what? The old man looked at him for a long moment. For completion. The word landed heavily. You said it, spoke through me, Li Wei said. The second voice. The old man did not deny it. It has not chosen someone since that night, he said quietly. Until now. Li Wei stepped away from the pillar. Why me? The old man's gaze moved toward the porcelain bowl on the floor. Because your mother interrupted it, he said, and because you opened the door. The hall felt too small. You think it wants me to finish what she stopped? Li Wei said. I think, the old man replied carefully, it does not want freedom. It wants rest. The idea felt strange. You were not afraid of it, the old man added. Li Wei thought of the voice in his head. Calm, patient. No, he said slowly. I am not. The villagers began to disperse, moving back toward their homes in quiet lines. No one spoke loudly. No one accused him. They had already decided something. Li Wei stepped outside the hall and looked toward the fields. The sun was higher now, but the light seemed thin. A faint grayness lay over the village, as if color itself had dulled. He walked home without speaking to anyone. Inside his house, the air felt close. He sat at the table and placed the porcelain bowl in front of him again. Do not let them finish it. His mother's warning echoed in his mind. She had stopped the binding to save a girl, but she had also left the bowl, drifting one, unheld. He ran his fingers along the rim of the bowl. The voice from the night before lingered at the edge of his thoughts, not pressing, not demanding. Waiting outside, a child began to cry. The sound carried across the courtyard, thin and tired. Li Wei closed his eyes. He could feel it now, not as a voice, as a weight in the air, a presence that had settled into the village like a second season. Not winter, not summer. Grief, and beneath it, something steady, watching him, choosing him. When he opened his eyes again, the room felt different, not darker, closer, as if the space between walls had narrowed slightly. He understood then it would not leave, not until someone allowed it to finish what had been started, and this time it would not ask twice. The sky was still dark when Li Wei stepped into the courtyard with the porcelain bowl in his hands. A thin frost covered the stone path. His breath showed in the air. The village lay quiet, roofs pale under fading stars. No mist rolled through. The fields tonight. The air felt still, as if waiting. He had not slept inside his chest. The weight remained. Not sharp, not painful, just present. He walked toward the ancestral hall without looking back. This time, the doors stood open. Someone had swept the courtyard. The broken seal was gone. A small table had been placed near the entrance. 3 bundles of incense rested. On top, the villagers were already there. They stood in a loose circle around the hall, silent as bare trees in winter. No one stepped forward to stop him. No one whispered. The old man met his eyes once, then lowered his gaze. Li Wei entered the hall. The air inside felt colder than outside. Moonlight slipped through the roof beams, laying pale lines across the floor. The altar had been cleared. The overturned burner was set upright again. He knelt in the center of the room. His hands moved slowly. He placed the porcelain bowl before him. He set fresh incense into the ash. He struck a match. The flame flickered, then caught. Smoke rose in. Thin lines. He did not speak the old invitation. He closed his eyes. "I am not here to bind you," he said softly. "I am here to finish what was left open." The words felt steady in his mouth. The air did not change at once. He listened to outside. The villagers shifted slightly. Cloth rustled. A cough was quickly swallowed. Inside the hall, the smoke from the incense lifted straight up. Then it bent. The temperature dropped in a slow wave. Not sudden, not violent. His breath thickened in front of him. The weight inside his chest deepened. It settled, not pushing, not forcing. He let it at the pressure behind his eyes returned. Familiar now. He did not fight it. He placed his palms flat against the wooden floor and bowed his head. "I know you are tired," he whispered. The air seemed to draw closer around him. The second voice entered gently. "You hear it. It was not a question." "Yes," he said. Images moved through him like slow water. Not pictures he could see clearly, but feelings shaped into memory. Homes filled with mourning, empty fields, children standing at doors that would never open again. Centuries of quiet sorrow. The weight was not cruel. It was heavy because no one had carried it long enough. "You were never meant to wander," Li Wei said. "You were meant to rest." The incense crackled softly outside. The wind rose slightly, brushing against the hall walls. The voice did not answer with words. This time, it flowed into him. His spine straightened without thought. His breathing slowed until it matched a rhythm that was not fully his own. The chanting began, not from outside, from him low at first. A tone that moved through his chest and into the wood beneath him. It did not feel forced. It felt remembered. The villagers heard it. He sensed their stillness sharpen, their chant layered slowly. One note folded over another, rising in careful waves. He did not resist. He listened through him. The presence began to speak, not in anger, not in threat, in names, old names. Some were soft, some cracked at the edges, names that had not been spoken in the village for decades, names of those lost to famine, to flood, to illness. Each name left his mouth with weight, then drifted into the air like breath in winter. Outside, someone began. to cry quietly. The hall seemed to widen as the names continued. The beams no longer felt close. The floor no longer felt cold. The weight inside him shifted. It grew heavier for a moment, as if gathering all that had been left behind. Then it began to lighten. The chant softened. The rhythm slowed. The names grew fewer. He felt tears run down his face, though he did not remember starting to cry. The presence within him trembled, not in fear, in release. The incense burned low. Ash fell into the bowl in small grey flakes. The sky outside began to pale. A thin blue light crept into the hall. The chanting thinned until it was barely more than a hum. Then even that changed. The sound that left him last was not a chant. It was something softer, almost like weeping, not his own, a long breath, and then stillness. The weight inside his chest dissolved, not all at once. Slowly, like frost melting under first light, he felt himself alone in his body again, empty, but not hollow. The air in the hall warmed. The smoke from the incense rose straight up and faded. His arms gave out. Beneath him, he fell forward onto the wooden floor. Outside, the doors creaked open wider. Footsteps rushed in. Voices called his name. But they sounded distant, as if underwater. Hands turned him gently onto his back. The old man's face hovered above him, blurred by tears and light. "It is quiet," someone whispered dotly. Wei tried to listen. The chanting was gone. The pressure behind his eyes was gone. The hall felt like wood and dust and morning air. Nothing more. He closed his eyes. When he woke, he was lying in his own bed. Sunlight poured through the open window. It was brighter than he remembered. Clear. For a moment, he did not move. He listened. The wind moved through the bamboo. Outside it sounded like wind. No murmur beneath it. No layered voices. Just leaves brushing together. He sat up slowly. His body ached, but the weight was gone. Outside, he heard laughter, soft at first, then louder. Children running along the path. He stepped into the courtyard. The air felt lighter, not warmer, just open. Across the fields, farmers worked with steady hands. Their voices carried clearly. No whispering. The old man stood near the bat gate. He did not speak. He only bowed his head once. Li Wei returned the gesture. In the weeks that followed, small changes settled over the village. The rice ripened fully before harvest. Fruit held firm on its branches. The children no longer woke from dreams at the hall door. The ancestral hall remained open. No seal covered its doors. Sometimes villagers stepped inside to light incense, not in fear, but in respect. Li Wei often stood in the courtyard at dusk. The wind still moved through the bamboo groves. It still carried sound across the valley, but it no longer called anyone back. And when night fell, the village slept without listening for a second voice.